everyone, and happy Tuesday. Today we're going to talk about Daniel in the lion's den for the final in our three-part series on the book of Daniel. I'm going to start us off with a quote from Mahatma Gandhi. It says, "When I despair, I remember that all through history the way of truth and love have always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they can seem invincible, but in the end they always fall. Think of it, always." There's a similar sentiment found in the book of John. John 1:5 says that the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness shall not overcome it. This idea that goodness and love will always prevail, that they will always win, is one of the founding tenets of my faith. I really truly believe that if you choose goodness and love, you're going to be on the right side of history every time. And I think that Daniel believed that too. So we're going to look at a story of where Daniel continually chooses faith and chooses goodness and to do the right thing, and how he comes out on top. I'm going to start with Daniel chapter 6 and read you the first 5 verses. It says, "It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel." I'll pause just to tell you that a satrap was kind of like a local government official. Think of like a mayor or a governor, and then they were grouped together and each had one administrator who was kind of keeping track of where all they were. So it says the satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man, Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of God." So Daniel was targeted because he was doing such a good job that he was about to get a promotion. And the other satraps and administrators were jealous of him, and they wanted to find some way that they could convince the king that this was not the guy that he wanted to hire. And they looked into all of the work he was doing. They really dug. They vetted everything that he had done as an administrator, and they couldn't find anything. He had done nothing wrong. There wasn't even a little bit of corruption in there that they could pull out to take to the king and be like, "See, told you, not Daniel." He was kind of perfect at his job, and he had always done well for the king. And so they decided that the only choice they have is to trick the king into getting rid of Daniel. And they're going to do that by setting Daniel up and making him choose between the laws of the land and the laws of God, because they know that Daniel, as a faithful Jewish person, is going to choose the law of God over the law of man. So this is what happens. I'll read you from Daniel 6 through 9. It says, "So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, 'May King Darius live forever! The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed.' So King Darius put the decree in writing." So we can all guess what happens next, right? Daniel continues to pray 3 times a day with his window open facing Jerusalem, and they just kind of wait for the next time it happens and catch him in the act. And they bring this information to King Darius and say, "Remember that decree you just put into effect? Well, guess what? Daniel has defied you." And they remind the king that he's going to look weak if he goes back on his order. So the king very reluctantly decides that yes, he does have to follow through, and he goes to have Daniel thrown into the lion's den. And as he's throwing him in, he says this. He says, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." So Daniel's thrown into the den of lions, the stone is rolled in front of the door, and the king goes home to get no sleep that night. He's restless all night. He hurries back first thing in the morning to see what's happened to Daniel. And it says, "When he came near the den," this is verse 20, "he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, 'Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?' And Daniel answered, 'May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight.'" So in the end, the guys who tried to trick the king into getting rid of Daniel were the ones who ended up being eaten by the lions. For them, karma came around pretty quickly. And Daniel, who chose goodness, who chose to remain faithful, wound up being saved. He was saved from the lion's den, he was saved in the eyes of the king, and he was on the right side of history in that story. Now in this world, we know that a lot of times good people and innocent people have terrible things that happen to them. Other people make bad choices that wind up getting people hurt. There are some systems that are in place that people have put there intentionally or unintentionally that end up oppressing people for who they are, either be by their race or their religion or how they identify. All of these things that are in the world that we can look around and name that, clearly the world isn't perfect. It's not all fluff and smiles out there, but Scripture tells us to take heart, for God has overcome the world. And he did so by an act of sacrifice and an act of mercy and an act of grace that was born out of his perfect love for each and every one of us. And every time we choose to be good to others, to love others as we love ourselves, we get to take a part in that victory. And we get to help bring God's kingdom here to earth and shine God's light into the darkest of corners. So although the world isn't perfect and humans aren't perfect, I encourage you today to anchor your hope in the one who is, and do all that you can to help bend the arc in the right direction. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Bye.